General Marcus Teague felt untouchable during his farewell speech, until he decided to humiliate a silent old man in the back of the ballroom. Mocking Vince Callahan's loose suit, Teague arrogantly demanded to know his kill count, treating war like a simple scoreboard. But the laughter in the room died instantly when the doors flew open and elite officers, chests stacked with medals, marched in. Ignoring the general completely, Colonel Hayes stopped before the old man and rendered a flawless, tear-filled salute. That humble man was the legendary Eagle One, and his notebook didn't hold trophies of death, but the names of 218 Marines who made it home alive thanks to him. That night, arrogance collided with true honor. Where are you watching this story from? Let us know in the comments. If this journey of valor touched you, consider subscribing to Silent Veterans and help us give a voice to more incredible stories of our silent veterans. So what's your count, old man? The question cut through the officers' club ballroom like a blade. Lieutenant General Marcus Teague stood at the podium, dress blues immaculate under the chandeliers. His smile was wide, confident. The room, packed with over 200 Marines and families, erupted in polite laughter. This retirement ceremony at Camp Pendleton was his stage. He'd just finished a speech about operational excellence and the warrior ethos, when his eyes landed on a figure in the back, an old man, 70s, maybe older, sitting alone, far from the spotlight, dark suit hanging loose, tie crooked, gnarled hands on the tablecloth, not clapping, just sitting there, still as stone. "Hey, you there," Teague said, pointing. "Stand up. Let's give this man a hand." The old man lifted his gaze, pale gray eyes, the color of winter fog. Slowly, he stood, spine curved, shoulders hunched. "You look like you've been around," Teague said, condescension disguised as friendliness. "What's your story? How many deployments? And hey, what's your kill count? Let's hear some real war stories." The room shifted. Uncomfortable laughter. Older NCOs exchanged glances. Vince Callahan said nothing. "Come on, don't be modest," Teague pressed. "How many bad guys did you put down? 10, 20, 50? That's what we do, right? Close with and destroy the enemy." A captain stood. "Sir, I don't think—" "Sit down, Captain." Vince reached into his jacket and pulled out a small notebook, pocket-sized, bound in faded green leather, edges worn smooth, spine cracked and taped. He held it in both hands. Teague's eyes lit up. "You keep a journal. What's in there? Your body count. Your scoreboard." People winced. Vince stood there, thumb tracing the worn cover. Teague stepped down from the podium and strode forward. "Share with the class." The room held its breath. "You don't want to know what's in this book, General," Vince said, voice low and rough. Teague laughed. "Oh, I think I do. Is it classified? Secret missions? You some kind of spook? Maybe we've got Jason Bourne here, folks." He reached for the notebook. Let me see." "Sir, I'd rather you didn't." "I'm not going to hurt your little book." His fingers closed around the leather. "Is this your little scoreboard?" And Vince's world dissolved. November 2006, Ramadi, Iraq, the Malab district. The meat grinder. Vince Callahan lay on a rooftop, M24 pressed to his cheek, ghillie suit making him invisible. The heat was monstrous. Below, 3rd Battalion, 8th Marines, Joker Company, moved through narrow streets. 32 men. His radio crackled. "Eagle 1, this is Joker 6, approaching target building. Any movement? Lieutenant James Hayes, 26, 1st Combat Patrol. Joker 6, Eagle 1, negative. Streets are dead, 2 dead. Stay frosty." His spotter, Corporal Danny Ortiz, whispered, "Bad feeling about this." "Me too." The point man, Martinez, stacked up on the door. Hayes gave the signal. The IED detonated. Doorway erupted in fire and shrapnel. 3 men down. Then the shooting started. Muzzle flashes from 6 positions. AK-47s. The Marines scattered, pinned down. "Eagle 1, we are taking fire from multiple positions. We need support now." Vince's world narrowed. Breathing slowed. Heart rate dropped. He swept his scope across the battlefield. Window, 2nd floor, 11 o'clock. Shooter with AK, 420 meters. Rooftop, 3 o'clock. PKM machine gun, 470 meters. Alley, 9 o'clock. 2 men, 1 with RPG, 380 meters. Ortiz, give me a count. 6 primary shooters, maybe more. Jesus Christ, they're everywhere. 6 shooters, 18 rounds total. 2 minutes before overrun. Eagle 1, what do you have? Vince's finger slid to the trigger. I've got it. Stay down. He centered crosshairs on the first target. Young man, thin beard, keffia, leaning out, firing controlled bursts. Vince exhaled, held, squeezed. The rifle bucked. Through the scope, the man's head snapped back, red mist, body slumped forward. Hit. Next target, rooftop gunner, center mass, squeeze, down, hit. Alley, RPG team, spotter first, then gunner. 2 shots, 3 seconds. Hits, both down. 4 down, 14 rounds left. More insurgents moved into position. Vince fired methodically. Window, rooftop, doorway. Each shot perfectly placed. Window, 2 o'clock. Man with AK, squeeze. Down. Rooftop, 10 o'clock. Firing wildly. Squeeze. Down. Doorway, 12 o'clock. Man with grenade, squeeze. Down. Each shot was a decision. Each decision a life ended. He just fired, worked the bolt, found the next target. But with each trigger pull, he saw their faces, saw them fall. His mind cataloged every detail. Man with RPG on balcony, down. 2 insurgents with mortar, down, down. Sniper on distant rooftop, down. Magazine dry. He ejected it, slapped in a fresh one, chambered around. 3 seconds, 11 minutes, 17 shots, 17 confirmed kills. The street went quiet. The ambush was broken. Eagle 1, Jesus Christ, you saved us. All of us. Ortiz stared, face pale. 17. You dropped 17 in 11 minutes. 17. Vince lowered the rifle. 17 faces. 17 men who'd never go home. He knew the trade. 17 of them, or 32 of his own. The math was brutal. Necessary. Justified. But it didn't make it easier. 3 days later, Hayes found him cleaning his rifle. I'm putting you in for a silver star. You saved 32 lives. Don't. Eagle. You saved 32 lives with 17 shots. I know what I did. Then let me recognize it. Vince looked at him. Eyes hollow, haunted. I don't want a medal for killing 17 people, Lieutenant. They were enemy combatants. I know. But they were still people, human beings, and I still see their faces. Every single one. The man in the window. The PKM gunner. The spotter who saw me and knew he was about to die. I see them all. Hayes sat in silence. If you won't take a medal, at least let me buy you a beer when we get out of here. Small, tired smile. Deal. That night, Vince pulled out a small green notebook from the PX. He opened to the first blank page and started writing. Not the names of the men he'd killed, he'd never forget those. They were burned into his memory, forever. Instead, he wrote the names of the Marines he'd saved. All 32, Martinez, Hayes, Ortiz, everyone, carefully printed. Next to each name, 14 Nov 2006, Ramadi. Because if he was going to carry 17 deaths, he needed to know what they'd bought. He needed to see the purpose behind the cost. He needed to remember those 17 lives had purchased 32 others. That his nightmares, his ghosts, his burden, they meant something. He closed the notebook, running his thumb over the worn leathers, and whispered, 17 for 32. God help me. Let that be enough. The memory shattered. Heat of Ramadi dissolved. Smell of cordite faded. Weight of the M24 vanished. Vince blinked. Back in the ballroom at Camp Pendleton, notebook pressed into his palm, Teague's fingers still touching the worn leather. But something had changed. Through the crowd, Vince heard it. Heavy engines, growing louder. Every head turned toward the French doors. The sound was unmistakable. Big engines, multiple vehicles, moving with urgent speed. Teague's hand was still on the notebook. Confident smile faltered. What the hell is that? Through the glass, headlights swept across the twilight. 3 black Suburbans, windows tinted dark, rocketed into the parking lot. The lead vehicle jumped the curb, tires spitting gravel, screeched to a halt feet from the doors. The other 2 flanked it. Before they'd stopped, doors flew open. Out stepped 6 men in Marine Corps dress blues, full dress blues with white gloves and covers. But it was the ribbons that made the room go silent. Each man's chest was a canvas of multicolored bars stacked deep. Silver stars, bronze stars with V's, purple hearts, multiple. Navy crosses, combat action ribbons. Decades of hard combat. These were warfighters. 200 people frozen, watching. From the lead Suburban stepped a man who made the others look like privates. Colonel James Hayes, 46 now, hair gray at the temples, jaw like carved stone. Same dress blues, but his ribbons told a different story. Silver star with oak leaf cluster, bronze star with V device, purple heart with 2 clusters. Combat decorations earned in blood. But it was his face that commanded the room. A man on a mission. And his eyes were locked on Vincent Callahan. Teague released the notebook, stepping back, confused and indignant. What is the meaning of this? Who authorized this interruption? Hayes didn't even glance at him. He strode past the general as if he were furniture. The 6 Marines fell in behind, moving in perfect synchronization. The crowd parted. Hayes's polished shoes clicked on hardwood with parade ground precision. Each step deliberate, measured, inexorable. He crossed the ballroom in seconds that felt like hours. He stopped 3 feet from Vince. For a moment, the 2 men just looked at each other. Hayes's eyes were wet, glistening with barely controlled emotion. Then, in one fluid motion, he snapped to attention, spine ramrod straight, and raised his right hand in the sharpest, most flawless salute Vince had ever received. "Sir," Hayes said, voice carrying across the silent room with crystal clarity. "Eagle One, it is an honor and a privilege to stand before you." The words landed like a physical blow. Collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Eagle One. The call sign meant nothing to most. But to the older Marines, the ones who'd heard the whispered legends late at night, it was a name that carried immense weight. A ghost story. A myth. A legend. The sniper who could make impossible shots. The guardian angel on Overwatch. The man who saved platoons single-handedly. Eagle One. Vince, still holding the notebook, slowly straightened his stooped shoulders as much as his old spine would allow. Painful. You could see it in the way his jaw tightened. But he did it anyway. He returned the salute, hand trembling slightly, voice barely above a whisper but firm. "Colonel, you didn't have to come." "Yes, sir, I did." Hayes dropped his salute. Eyes never left Vince's face. "I heard what was happening here tonight. I heard what was being asked of you, and I couldn't let it stand. None of us could." Teague found his voice, stepping forward, face flushing with anger. "Colonel Hayes, what is the meaning of this interruption? I am in the middle of a ceremony, and you've just barged in." Hayes turned to face him. The look he gave could have frozen molten steel. Voice cold and formal, stripped of deference. "General Teague, with all due respect, sir, you need to shut your mouth and listen." The room went from silent to suffocating. A 3-star general had just been told to shut up by a colonel. Career suicide. Insubordination of the highest order. Teague's face went deep purple. Hands clenched into fists. "Excuse me, Colonel, you are way out of line. I will have your bars for this. I will have your career." "Then take them, sir." Hayes didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't back down 1 millimeter. Voice remained steady, controlled. "Take my bars, take my pension, take everything I've earned in 24 years of service. But first, you're going to hear what I have to say. Because you asked this man a question tonight, you demanded an answer, and you deserve to know exactly who you were talking to when you asked it." He turned back to the crowd, voice rising, filling the room with command presence. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Vincent Callahan. To those who don't know that name, Let me educate you. Let me tell you exactly who is standing before you tonight. He took a breath. This man served 28 years in the United States Marine Corps, Gulf War, Somalia, Iraq, Afghanistan, multiple deployments across multiple decades. Officially, he retired as a gunnery sergeant. Officially, his record shows good conduct, satisfactory performance, honorable service. Officially, he's just another retired NCO. Hayes's voice dropped but lost none of its intensity. Unofficially, Vincent Callahan operated at a level that required no rank, no recognition, no medals, no public acknowledgement. He worked in the shadows, on rooftops, in hide sites, watching over his brothers. They called him Eagle One, and that wasn't a call sign you requested. It wasn't one you earned in training or got assigned by some staff officer. It was given to you by the men whose lives you saved. Because when you were on Overwatch, when you were behind that scope, nothing got past you. You saw what others couldn't see. You made decisions others couldn't make. And you took the shots that no one else would take. He gestured to the 6 Marines behind him. These men here? Every single one of them is what we call an Eagle One veteran. That's not an official designation. You won't find it in any manual. But every Marine who served under Eagle One's protection knows what it means. It means you're alive because Vincent Callahan was watching your back. It means you went home to your family because he made the impossible shot. It means you got to live your life because he was willing to carry the weight of taking someone else's. One of the Marines, a barrel-chested master sergeant with weathered leather face, stepped forward. Voice rough with emotion. 2nd Fallujah, November 2004. House-to-house fighting. I was a corporal, green as grass. I got separated, pinned down in a building for 6 hours, surrounded, out of ammo, down to my knife and prayers. I radioed for help and Eagle One came over the net. Voice calm, steady. He said, "Keep your head down, Marine. I've got you." For the next hour, I heard his rifle, just that quiet thump, over and over, methodical, precise. When my squad reached me, I counted 11 bodies outside my position. 11 shots, 11 kills, 11 men who were going to end my life, and Eagle One cleared a path without ever showing his face. I'm standing here tonight because of him. Another Marine spoke up. A lieutenant colonel with graying temples. Helmand Province, Afghanistan, 2010. IED took out the lead vehicle. We were taking heavy fire from a fortified compound 400 meters out. We couldn't maneuver, couldn't call in air support. We were sitting ducks. Eagle One dropped 7 insurgents in under 3 minutes. 7 shots, 7 threats eliminated, 7 lives saved. Mine included. Hayes's jaw tightened, eyes glistening. And then there's Ramadi, November 14th, 2006. The Mala Ab district. He looked directly at Teague. "General, you asked this man for his kill count. You asked him like it was a game, like it was something to brag about over drinks. Let me tell you what that number represents." He reached out, and Vince, after a moment's hesitation, handed him the notebook. Hayes held it carefully, reverently, as if it were a holy relic. Hands were shaking. On November 14th, 2006, I was a 2nd lieutenant, 26 years old. It was my first combat patrol as a platoon commander. I thought I was ready. I was wrong. Voice cracked. My platoon, Joker Company, walked into an ambush in the Mala Ab district. IED detonated at the entrance to our target building. Massive explosion. 3 men down instantly. Martinez, our point man, was thrown 15 feet. Before we could process what happened, we were taking fire from 6 different positions. Windows, rooftops, alleyways, textbook ambush. We were pinned down with 3 casualties and no way to extract them. Completely exposed. He paused, swallowing hard. I called for support. QRF was 10 minutes out. Close air was 20. But we didn't have 10 minutes. We had maybe 2 before they overran our position. I could hear my Marines screaming. I could see the enemy moving to flank us, and I knew with absolute certainty that we were all going to die. All 32 of us. Hayes looked down at the notebook. And then Eagle One came over the net. Voice was calm, steady, like he was ordering coffee. He said, "I've got it. Stay down. That's all. Just those 5 words. He looked up. For the next 11 minutes, I listened to his rifle, that quiet thump from his suppressor, over and over, methodical, precise, relentless. 17 shots, 17 enemy combatants down. He broke that ambush single-handedly, gave us time to extract our wounded, establish a defensive perimeter, and wait for QRF. 32 Marines lived that day because of what Vincent Callahan did. Hayes opened the notebook, hands shaking badly. After the mission, when we were back at the FOB and the adrenaline had worn off, I tried to put him in for a Silver Star. I documented everything, the impossible shots, the split-second decisions, the lives saved. He looked at Vince, eyes wet. He refused, flat out refused. He said he didn't want a medal for killing 17 people. He said those 17 faces would haunt him for the rest of his life, and a piece of ribbon wouldn't change that. He said that every time he closed his eyes, he saw them. The man in the window, the machine gunner on the roof, the RPG team in the alley, all of them, every single one. Hayes's voice dropped to almost a whisper. So instead, he started keeping this. He held up the notebook. These aren't kill counts, General. These aren't tallies or statistics or numbers to brag about. These are names, Marine names, the names of every single man and woman whose life he saved by making those impossible shots. 32 names from Ramadi alone. Over 200 total, 218 to be exact. 218 Marines who are alive today, who got to go home to their families, who got to live their lives, because Vincent Callahan was willing to do what needed to be done and carry the weight of it forever. He walked slowly toward Teague, holding the notebook out. You asked him what his count was. You wanted a number. Here's the truth, sir. Vincent Callahan has more confirmed kills than any sniper in Marine Corps history. The exact number is classified, but it's north of 300. 300 human beings whose lives he ended with a single pull of the trigger. Hayes's voice hardened. But he's never spoken that number. Not once in all the years I've known him. Not in after-action reports unless required. Not in conversations. Not even to himself if he can help it. Because for him, every single one of those kills is a face he still sees when he closes his eyes. A decision he still questions in the dark hours of the night. A weight that never lifts, never lessens, never goes away. That's his count, General. That's what you asked him to share with a room full of strangers like it was a party trick. Teague took the notebook with numb fingers. Hands were shaking. He opened it slowly, eyes scanning the pages, row after row of names, written in tight, precise handwriting. Martinez, Joseph L. 14 Nov 2006, Ramadi. Hayes, James R. 14 Nov 2006, Ramadi. Names went on and on, page after page. Hayes's voice softened but lost none of its edge. You stood up here tonight, General, and talked about warriors. About the warrior ethos. About operational excellence and closing with and destroying the enemy. Good words. Important concepts. But then you asked a man who embodies that ethos, who has lived it, bled it, sacrificed everything for it, to reduce his service, his sacrifice, his burden to a number, like it was a game. He stepped closer. Sir, I know your record. I know you've spent your career in staff positions, in the Pentagon, advising generals and politicians on strategy and policy. That's important work. The Corps needs officers like you. We need strategic thinkers, planners, people who can see the big picture. But sir, with all due respect, you've never had to look through a scope and make the decision about which human being lives and which one dies. You've never had to pull a trigger and watch a man fall and know that you just ended someone's son, someone's brother, someone's father. You've never had to carry the weight of those faces for the rest of your life. And you sure as hell have never had to do it 17 times in 11 minutes while your brothers were dying in the street below you, and the only thing standing between them and death was your skill and your will. The room was so quiet, you could hear hearts beating. The silence was crushing, oppressive, thick enough to cut with a knife. Teague stood frozen, notebook trembling in his hands. All color had drained from his face. Mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He looked down at the names, then up at Vince, and for the first time that evening, he truly saw him. Not an old man in an ill-fitting suit, not a forgotten relic, but a giant, a titan, a man who'd carried more weight in one day than Teague had carried in his entire career. Teague's voice came out as a croak. He cleared his throat, tried again. I didn't know. I didn't understand. No, sir, Hayes said quietly, anger draining away, replaced by something that might have been pity. You didn't. Because men like Eagle One don't advertise what they've done. They don't seek recognition or awards or public acknowledgement. They carry the cost in silence, in darkness, in the private hours when no one else is watching. And they hope, they pray, that the lives they saved, the brothers they brought home, were worth the ghosts they carry. Vince finally spoke. His voice was soft, but it carried through the room like a pronouncement. General Teague, you asked me for a number tonight. You asked me for my count, so here it is. 347. That's how many confirmed kills I made over 28 years of service across 4 different conflicts. I know the exact number because I remember every single one. Every face, every circumstance, every context, every decision. He took the notebook back from Teague's shaking hands, holding it against his chest. But that's not what I count, sir. I don't count kills. I count costs. Every time I looked through that scope and made the decision to end a life, I wasn't thinking about enemy combatants or targets or threats or statistics. I was thinking about the Marines in front of me who would die if I didn't act. The young men and women who trusted me to keep them safe. The lives that would be shattered. The families that would be destroyed. If I hesitated even 1 second, his voice grew harder, more intense. And after I pulled that trigger, after I watched that person fall, I had to live with what I'd done. The man I'd killed. The family that would never see him again. The wife who would become a widow. The children who would grow up without a father. The mother who would bury her son. The weight of taking a human life, even when it was justified, even when it was necessary, even when it saved dozens of my brothers. That weight never goes away, General, never. He opened the notebook again, gnarled fingers tracing the names with infinite gentleness. You want to know what my count is, General? It's written in the nightmares I still have 30 years later. It's written in the faces I still see every time I close my eyes. It's written in the therapist appointments I've been going to for 15 years because I can't stop seeing them. Can't stop questioning every decision. Can't stop wondering if there was another way. That's my count. That's what you asked me to share. His pale gray eyes fixed on Teague. But if you want to know what matters, if you want to know what keeps me going, what gives meaning to all that pain and all those ghosts, it's right here. He held up the notebook. 218 names. 218 Marines who lived because I made those impossible choices. Who went home to their families. Who got to live their lives. Who got to be fathers and husbands and sons and brothers. That's what I count when the nightmares get too bad. That's what makes the cost bearable. Not easy, not painless, but bearable. The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. The weight of his words hung in the air like smoke. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Teague spoke, voice barely a whisper. Mr. Callahan, I owe you an apology. What I said tonight, what I asked of you, it was thoughtless, cruel, disrespectful. I treated your service and your sacrifice and like it was entertainment. I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. Vince looked at him for a long moment, pale gray eyes weighing the man's sincerity, measuring his soul. Then he nodded once, slowly. Thank you, General. I accept your apology. Hayes stepped back, expression still hard. Sir, with all due respect, an apology isn't enough. This man deserves better than what happened here tonight, and every Marine who will ever serve under your command deserves better than a general who doesn't understand the human cost of the orders he gives, who treats war like a video game score. Teague's jaw tightened, but he nodded slowly. You're right, Colonel. You're absolutely right. He looked around the room, at all the faces watching him, judging him, and then back at Vince. Mr. Callahan, if you'll allow it, I'd like to make this right. Not just with words, but with action. Vince said nothing. just watched him with those steady, unreadable eyes. Teague straightened his shoulders, and when he spoke again, his voice was stronger, more certain. He turned to address the entire room. Ladies and gentlemen, what you witnessed here tonight is more than just one man's story. It's more than just a lesson in humility for a foolish general who thought he knew what war was. This is a lesson about the true cost of service. He took a deep breath. As of tomorrow morning, I will be implementing a new training protocol for all officers 05 and above in my command. It will be mandatory, with no exceptions, and it will be called the Callahan Protocol. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Every senior officer, Teague continued, voice growing stronger, will undergo mandatory training in combat ethics and psychological resilience, specifically designed to reconnect leadership with the human cost of the orders they give. We will bring in combat veterans, men and women like Mr. Callahan, to share their experiences with us. Not their kill counts, not their war stories, but their costs, their burdens, their truths, what it actually means to make those decisions, to carry that weight, to live with those ghosts. His voice filled the room, because I realized something tonight. I realized that I've been making decisions about war, about combat operations, about sending Marines into harm's way, without truly understanding what I was asking of them. I've been treating numbers on a spreadsheet like abstractions instead of human beings. And that ends now, for me, and for every officer under my command. Approval rippled through the crowd like a wave. Several of the older NCOs were nodding vigorously, some wiping at their eyes. A few people began to clap, and the applause built slowly, then erupted into something thunderous. Teague looked back at Vince. It's not enough, Mr. Callahan. It will never be enough to make up for what I said, for what I asked of you. But it's a start. And I give you my word, as a Marine and as an officer, that I will spend the rest of my career making sure that what happened here tonight, my ignorance, my arrogance, my disrespect, never happens to another warrior who's paid the price you've paid. Vince studied him for a moment, weathered face unreadable. Then he extended his hand. Then that's a good start, General. A real good start. They shook hands, and something passed between them in that moment. Not forgiveness, exactly, but understanding. A bridge built across a chasm of experience. Hayes stepped forward and placed a hand on Vince's shoulder. Sir, there's one more thing. With your permission, I'd like to share something with everyone here. He turned to the crowd. Eagle One never accepted any of the medals he was recommended for. Not one. Not the Silver Star. Not the Bronze Stars, nothing. But there's something he did accept. Something that every Marine he saved wanted him to have. He nodded to one of the Marines, who stepped forward carrying a wooden shadow box. Inside, mounted on deep blue velvet, was a single patch. The eagle, globe, and anchor of the Marine Corps. But with one modification, a small numeral 1, stitched in gold thread above the eagle. The craftsmanship was exquisite, clearly made with love and care. This was made by the Marines of Joker Company after Ramadi, Hayes explained, voice thick with emotion. All 32 of us contributed. We worked together to create something that would represent what you mean to us. It's the only Eagle One patch ever made, one of a kind, irreplaceable. And we voted unanimously, every single Marine, that you should have it. His voice cracked. Not because of how many enemies you killed, not because you're some kind of superhuman warrior, but because of how many of your brothers you saved. Because you were willing to carry the weight so we didn't have to. Because you gave us the gift of going home to our families. That's why. The Marine handed the shadow box to Vince with both hands, face solemn. Vince took it with shaking hands, staring down at the patch through eyes that were suddenly blurred with tears. For the first time that entire night, his iron composure cracked completely. Eyes went wet, jaw trembling. He pressed the box to his chest and closed his eyes, shoulders shaking with silent emotion. Thank you, he whispered, voice breaking. Thank you. The room erupted in applause, not polite, ceremonial clapping, but thunderous, heartfelt applause that shook the chandeliers. Marines stood. Families stood. Everyone in the ballroom rose to their feet. Some were saluting, Others had hands over hearts. Several were crying openly. Vince stood there, clutching the shadow box like it was the most precious thing in the world, shoulders shaking with silent emotion. Hayes stood beside him, one hand still on his shoulder, own eyes wet with tears he wasn't ashamed to shed. The applause continued for a full minute, before finally beginning to die down. When the room was quiet again, Vince cleared his throat and spoke one last time. Voice was rough, broken by emotion, but it carried. I want to say something to all the young Marines here tonight, to all the warriors who are still serving, who are still carrying the weight, who are still making the hard choices. He looked around the room, fresh faces, eager faces, faces that hadn't yet seen what war really was. This uniform we wear, this service we give, it's not about the glory, it's not about the medals or the recognition, it's about the person standing next to you. It's about making the hard choices so they don't have to. It's about carrying the weight so they can go home. That's all. That's everything. Voice grew softer, more intimate. And when you make those choices, when you carry that weight, remember that you're not alone. Every warrior who came before you carried it too. Every Marine who wore this uniform and made those impossible decisions is walking beside you, carrying their own ghosts. You honor us by serving with integrity, by remembering that every decision has a cost, by counting what matters. He tapped the shadow box gently. Count the lives you save. Count the brothers and sisters you bring home. Count the families that stay whole because of what you did. That's the number that will help you sleep at night. That's the legacy that matters. He looked at Teague one last time. And one more thing. To the leaders, to the officers who will give the orders that send these young men and women into harm's way, never forget that your decisions have faces. They have names. They have families waiting for them. Treat that responsibility with the gravity it deserves. Make sure what you ask us to do is worth the cost. Because those of us who execute those orders, who live with the consequences, will remember. He nodded. That's all I have to say, General. The ceremony ended shortly after, but no one was in a hurry to leave. Marines crowded around Vince, shaking his hand, thanking him, some just standing nearby in respectful silence. He spoke quietly with each one, humility never wavering, patience endless. Hayes stood off to the side, watching with a small smile. One of the other Marines came up beside him. That was something, Colonel. I've never seen anything like it. Hayes nodded, eyes never leaving Vince. Neither have I. But it needed to happen. Men like Eagle One deserve to be recognized, not for the kills, but for what they carried so we could come home. 6 months later, a cold Saturday morning in February, the kind where marine fog rolls in thick and cold, seeps into your bones. General Marcus Teague sat alone in a small diner just off base in Oceanside, California. He'd taken to coming here on weekends, away from the uniform and rank and weight of command. Just another man in civilian clothes, drinking coffee and thinking. The Callahan Protocol had been implemented across all Marine Corps bases, and Teague had personally overseen every single session at Camp Pendleton. He'd sat through each one, listening to veterans share their stories. Not the heroic parts, but the costs, the nightmares, the therapy, the marriages that failed, the addictions they fought, the ghosts they carried. It had changed him, profoundly, made him a better officer, a better leader, a better man. The bell above the diner door chimed. Teague looked up from his coffee. Vincent Callahan walked in, shaking the cold from his shoulders. Simple jacket, worn jeans, work boots. He looked like any other old man starting his Saturday with breakfast. He spotted Teague and paused, recognition crossing his weathered face. Teague stood immediately, heart hammering. Mr. Callahan, please join me. Vince hesitated for just a moment, then nodded and walked over. He slid into the booth across from Teague, movements slow and careful, old bones protesting. For a long moment, neither man spoke. The silence stretched between them, weighted with unspoken things but not uncomfortable. Outside, fog pressed against the windows. Finally, Teague found his voice. Mr. Callahan, I've been hoping I'd run into you. I wanted to tell you. The Callahan Protocol. It's changing things. Really, truly changing them. We've had over 300 officers go through it so far, and the feedback has been incredible. Officers are connecting with their Marines in ways they never did before. They're asking better questions, making better decisions, understanding the human cost of command, and it's spreading. Other bases are implementing it. Other commands are reaching out asking for the curriculum. Vince nodded slowly. That's good to hear, General. Real good. It's because of you. Because of what you taught me that night. Because you were willing to share your truth even when it hurt. Teague's hands were wrapped tight around his coffee mug, knuckles white. I've been in the Corps for 26 years, Mr. Callahan. I thought I understood what service meant. I thought I knew what sacrifice looked like, but I didn't. Not really. Not until you showed me. Vince's eyes were kind, gentle. You learned, General. That's what matters. A lot of men in your position would have doubled down, would have defended their pride, would have made excuses. You didn't. You listened, you changed, you took action. That takes a different kind of courage. Teague's throat tightened. I owe you more than a public apology, Mr. Callahan. I owe you a real one. A private one. What I said to you that night. What I asked you to do. How I treated you. It was cruel. It was ignorant. It was everything a Marine officer should never be. And I'm sorry. Truly. Deeply sorry. Vince reached across the table and placed his weathered, spotted hand on top of Teague's. The gesture was simple, almost fatherly. I accept your apology, General, and I appreciate it more than you know. But more than that, I appreciate what you've done since that night. You took a hard lesson and turned it into something that will help thousands of young Marines for years to come. That's real leadership. That's the mark of a man who's willing to grow. Teague felt something break loose in his chest. A knot of shame and regret he'd been carrying for 6 months, wound so tight he'd forgotten it was there until this moment. Thank you, Mr. Callahan. That means more than you could possibly know. They sat together for another 20 minutes, talking quietly over coffee and eggs. Teague asked questions. Real questions. Honest questions. Not about tactics or strategy, but about how to better support his Marines. How to recognize the signs of someone carrying too much weight. How to build a culture that valued the human cost as much as the mission success. How to lead with both strength and compassion. And Vince answered, patiently, thoughtfully, generously sharing wisdom earned through decades of carrying burdens most men would never understand. He talked about creating spaces where Marines felt safe sharing their struggles. About the importance of mental health resources without stigma. About how the strongest warriors were the ones who admitted they needed help. When Vince finally stood to leave, Teague stood with him and extended his hand. Mr. Callahan, thank you for the lesson, for your service, for your patience with an old fool who didn't know what he didn't know. Vince shook his hand firmly, a small smile creasing his weathered face. Just remember it, General. Every number has a name. Every order has a cost. Every decision echoes in someone's life forever. Keep that in your heart. Carry it with you every day, and you'll do right by your Marines. I will. I promise you that. On my honor. Vince nodded, satisfied. Then he turned and walked toward the door. He paused with his hand on the handle and looked back over his shoulder. And General, you're not an old fool. You're a leader who learned, who grew, who changed. That makes you one of the good ones. Don't forget that. He pushed through the door and disappeared into the cold morning fog. Teague stood there for a long moment, watching the space where Vince had been. Then he sat back down, pulled out his phone, and sent a message to his chief of staff. Schedule another Callahan protocol session for next month. Invite more senior officers. We need to do more. We need to reach more people. He looked out the window at the fog-shrouded street where Vince had disappeared into the crowd. The old man walked alone, shoulders stooped under the weight of 71 years and 347 ghosts and 218 saved lives. But he walked with purpose, with dignity, with the quiet strength of a man who knew that his burden had meaning, that his pain had bought something precious, that his sacrifices had mattered, and General Marcus Teague understood, finally and completely, what it truly meant to be a warrior. Not the glory of victory, Not the medals on the chest, not the stories told at ceremonies, but the cost, the weight, the burden, and the honor, the sacred, terrible honor of carrying it so others wouldn't have to. Vincent Callahan's story reminds us that true heroes don't measure their greatness in kills. They measure it in the lives they save and the weight they carry in silence. If you were moved by Eagle One's story of quiet courage and the real cost of service, please like this video, share it with someone who respects our veterans, and subscribe to Silent Veterans for more stories of the unassuming heroes who walk among us.